F1 is changing in a big way for the 2026 season. I'm Tim Hauraney. This is Nailing the Apex. Active aero, smaller floors, new power units, different overtake modes. What does it all mean? Well, I'm here today to talk about all of it because the FIA and F1 have sent me a massive amount of documents that I've been combing through all day today. It is Wednesday evening, and I'm just getting around to doing this now because I've been busy taping some pods, but also busy going through this documentation that is going to be very important for the F1 fan out there. The F1 fan that's a hardcore, the ones that are just casual fans as well. So I figured that the best way of trying to get some of these messages across was to jump on here, comb through it all, try to distill it all down, to explain it to you, so you can take it with you and have it in the back of your mind when 2026 season starts in Australia, or even if you're a hardcore and you want to tune into testing, even when testing starts, because it's going to be very important, the language that we're about to use and go through in this document. So Formula One and the FIA, they wanted to avoid a lot of gimmicks, jargon, knowing that simple, more punchy and meaningful language was preferred more by fans who are older and newer to the sport. So Formula One, the FIA, they consulted with a pretty big group of new, casual, and hardcore fans to find the right terminology that would help fans better understand these phrases and the technology a little easier. Honestly, these phrases and the wording for things actually helps me a lot too, because what it used to be and the direction that they were taking the language in, for me, was all very confusing. And this is my job, right? This is what I do, cover Formula One. And so I do appreciate the fact that F1 and the FIA went to these lengths and extents and worked with the teams, worked with the engineers to come up with different phrasing that we can use throughout the season to help explain things a little easier. It helps me understand a little easier as well. So this new era of Formula One, it's going to be quite complex with the new technical phrases that you may hear a lot in 2026. So wanted to make sure, introduce this all to you right now. To be one of the biggest regulation changes in Formula One is saying something, and that's what this is. I have never seen, or have I been a part of, a Formula One regulation change this big, this drastic. So let's start with the engines, because they're changing, the power units. So F1 will be sticking with the 1.6 liter V6 turbo hybrid, but with a big increase in the amount of the electrical component, the electrical power that these new 2026 power units are going to be using. So the drivers are also, on top of all that, going to be tasked with having to manage all of this new energy during the Grand Prix. They will have to understand when they can deploy, when they recharge the batteries, when they deploy that energy, and how they can use that to attack their rivals. So with the power unit, it's going to be a 50-50 split. Okay, you're going to have 50% of that energy is going to be coming from the power unit. 50% of the other part of the energy is going to be coming from the battery. And there are going to be terms and phrases that we're going to have to acknowledge and use. And so I want to start with the chassis and the aerodynamics. So quick explainer on the power unit. Let's jump over to the aerodynamics, because those are changing as well. And what is called a nimble car concept. And that was directed by the FIA. So the drivers over the past few years have been complaining a lot about the size of the F1 cars. They keep getting bigger and they keep getting heavier. And that has been, it's been ruining the racing at some tracks. Monaco, for instance, you can really pass there to begin with, but since the cars are even bigger and heavier, you really definitely cannot pass in Monaco now. And same with some other tracks as well. So with things getting bigger and also heavier, the car begins to not handle as nimble as a Formula One car should. I remember 2003, 2004, 2005, those cars extremely nimble. Watching them up close because I was a part of the Renault driver development program, got to go to a lot of F1 races and sit trackside and sometimes get to talk to some of the drivers and the engineers and be around the pits. And so getting to see those cars up close and then comparing those cars to the ones we have now, they're two totally different things. Those 03, 04, 05 cars were extremely light, nimble. You could throw them around, catch them really quickly. They're like big go-karts. Where now, they're very clumsy. They're heavy. They're hard to get around, hard to get over curbs. And so the goal was to try and make the cars smaller and lighter. So the FIA set off to design F1 cars that are going to reverse, that trend of things getting bigger and heavier. And these new cars will need to be 30 kilograms lighter. So with a target of about 724 kilograms plus the mass of the tires, the dimensions of these 2026 cars, they're also going to be altered as well. The wheelbase is down by 200 millimeters to 3,400 millimeters. The width of the car is also being reduced by 100 millimeters, and the floor width has been reduced by 150 millimeters as well. So the floors were obviously a big part of F1 from 2022 to the end of 2025. They're still going to be important, but not as important. Not a lot of the aerodynamics is going to come from underneath the car. There will be some, but not as much as there was for the last regulation that we just came out of. So with these changes, the downforce that the cars will be producing is going to be a lot less from what we're coming out of. And that reduction is about 30%. And the drag, so the drag of the car, falling in the region of 55%. And that is good for the racing, I think, but the cars will be slower through the corners. They will, however, though, be faster coming out of the corners. So the lap times are going to be slower than the 2025 cars. But I did hear from the FIA, and they feel that the expectation is that the 11 teams competing will recover a lot of that lost time quickly as development cycles mature over the next few seasons. So no more DRS as well. That's gone. And in its place is movable aerodynamics with the front and the rear wing. And the tires, they're also changing as well. Now, I should circle back to the DRS real quickly because so now that it's gone and being replaced by movable aero, so the front wing flaps opening, rear wing flaps opening, there are going to be certain parts of the racetrack where that will be allowed to be deployed. When it comes to the tires, they're also changing. The size of the front tires are 25 millimeters narrower, with the rear tires 30 millimeters narrower. And the hopes that is to cut down on that drag that I had mentioned above and cut down on the weight of the car as well. There were times when the teams were using like the wheel caps to create vortices that would spill off the car, which would then affect the car behind because of all that dirty air. So that's sort of getting cleaned up as well. They tried to do it with the wheel hubcaps that they introduced for this regulation, but it didn't help enough. So they kind of have their own way of doing this now, where they think it's going to be a lot more controlled in the manner of how the wheel caps are built, and each team can build their own. However, if they do build their own, they have to be uploaded onto a server where every other team can see how they're built, so teams can either go with what another team has built or create their own. Let's move over and talk more about the power unit. Just want to come back to that because obviously we started with it. So with the power unit, like I had mentioned, a split in that power. So 50-50, 50% of the power coming from the internal combustion engine, 50% coming from the battery. So the driver now has more power in their hands with this new regulation. So probably more so than ever, the driver is really going to have to think their way through a Grand Prix. And how do they battle on track? They're going to have to really think about when to deploy that energy and recover that energy as well. And I was speaking with a lot of the drivers about this in Abu Dhabi and most recently a few days ago. And it sounds like the racing is really going to change with how the energy is deployed, how it's recovered, and how the driver uses it to attack or uses it during qualifying. So the driver really is going to have to think a lot more, even though they already are thinking quite a bit, but think even more so through a Grand Prix. You can bet that there's, the drivers right now are probably going to do their holiday breaks. Probably 2 weeks. And I bet you a lot of them are going to be right back in the sim and getting ready for this test mid-January that we're going to be having in Spain. Because I don't see a lot of drivers taking a lot of time off now. It's going to be getting back to training, and it's going to be getting back into the sim as fast as possible to get ready for this regulation, because it's going to be so different. The drivers are going to have to be changing their driving style so much. But for this new energy deployment recovery, there's massive tactical elements to it. And where will the driver, where will the driver deploy it? Where will they use it? How will they use it? Will they use it out of a corner? Will they use it on the straights? Will they use it going into a corner? Like, how is that going to work, really? So we're going to dive into these new features where the driver will be so much more of the focal point for the Grand Prix than they have been for a very long time. So let's talk about overtake mode. So the function of the overtake mode. So for drivers within 1 second of a car in front, to deploy extra power and to instigate an overtake, basically it replaces the DRS and aids in on-track passing. So being a strategic tool to be used, all in one go, or it can be spread over the lap. So how the driver wants to use it. If they want to keep up with the car in front, and maybe stay in a pit window, let's say, maybe they don't want to deploy all the energy at once to do an overtake and then have to recapture that energy in later on in another lap. You can spread it out, right? So, and there's also going to be boost mode. So boost mode, so it's driver operated. All of these are driver operated. Energy deployment tool for the energy recovery system. So that's the ERS. You might hear that quite a bit on the broadcast as well, but it's to be used offensively or defensively. So depending on your track position, it gives the driver maximum power from the engine and the battery at the push of a button. So think of it like push to pass almost. No matter where they are on the track, can use it at any time. Then there's the recharge function. So the drivers can recharge their batteries with that recovered energy from braking. So gone is the MGUH. So the MGUH, which was the motor generator unit heat, that was used to capture energy for the battery from heat components on the engine. Think of like the turbo, for instance. It generates heat. They can capture energy from that. That was getting stored into the batteries. Now, that's gone. It was a very expensive piece of equipment. The teams didn't want it anymore, and they've gone with just kinetic energy. So that's how these cars are going to feed the batteries, is essentially with the MGUK. So, uh, for example, brakes, calipers, energy that comes off of that, stored in the battery. I think the other one I was told was like downshifting or even using the gearbox, where there's energy that's being given off by that as well. So like engine braking, also capturing a lot of that energy as well. Um, so drivers can recharge their battery with that recovered energy from the braking. Also on throttle lift at the end of straights and even corners where only partial power is applied. So those are going to be things you are going to hear a lot of over an F1 season, which would be overtake mode, boost mode, recharge, also changing. And this one for me is really interesting, is sustainable fuels. So each team is going to have a fuel provider essentially. And let's use Petronas from Mercedes as an example. And they've been working on building sustainable fuels for this engine regulation, for this power unit regulation for a few years now. So using carbon capture, also been using waste and recycled waste to try and build a fuel that could be used in these F1 cars, but also could be used as like a drop in and go. And that could change our auto sector around the entire globe and could help lean vehicles off of petrol and would allow us to still use our older cars in a more sustainable way. And for me, that is really exciting. And if they're able to nail the sustainable fuels portion of all this, I mean, that's huge. That is absolutely, I can't tell you how big that is. That is massive. That could change the auto industry. It really could. You have a lot of older cars on the road, and giving those cars or those internal combustion engines a second life by doing it in a sustainable way, then yeah, really fascinating stuff. I've been following the direct air capture, so the carbon capture storylines probably since I want to say 2016. I've been following that, and that comes from Carbon Engineering, which is a company that's out in British Columbia in Canada, and learned about it from them in my time going back and forth from Toronto to Vancouver for a number of years. And it's really fascinating technology. So interesting to see if, some of that, how that plays into the F1 season, and then how does that trickle over into our road going cars. Pretty fascinating stuff. So for this new set of regulation, there is testing coming up. It'll be, I believe it's the third week of January. Pretty sure that's what it is. And that is going to be closed off to the media. So I won't have any access to it. I'm sure someone will sneak in with a video camera and tape some of it. And we probably will see some of it leak online and we can talk about it. But that one is going to be closed off to the public. It's going to be closed off to the media. Won't see anything. However, I will go to day 2 of testing in Bahrain. I've got my flight booked for that one. That'll be fun. But I will do my best to get on a couple other experts who are really, really good at understanding how the power unit, battery, driver operated, how it all works. And so maybe you can explain this and distill it down a little bit better than what I already did. But that being said, I mean, it is fascinating technology, and that is what Formula One is as well. Not only a sport, but also moving that technology forward is absolutely fascinating. We'll be back with some more Nailing the Apex next week. We're going to be doing a year in review. I sat down and did that with BBC's Jenny Gao. If you know who Jenny Gao is, she's great. F1 journalist, F1 reporter, pundit. Works for the BBC, and her and I sat down, chopped up 2025, and yeah, so that will be coming out next week. Also, on top of all that, Adam and I should be back together by January. I am going to take some time off for the holidays, going out west to the mountains to spend some of my holiday downtime. Going to recharge the batteries for a few weeks out west. It's going to be great in the mountains. I'm looking forward to it big time. And I'll have lots of stories on that. Cover some of it on my Instagram as well. So yeah, should be a good time. But yeah, stay tuned for our next episode with Jenny Gao coming out next Monday. And we'll talk to everybody later.